Okay, this is where we start. Ready? Right. This is where we start, Rebecca. Right here. This is the
Okay.
start. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. I'm Steve Lambert from the Center for Artistic Activism, and this is Rebecca Bray.
Hello.
And we have a guest, a surprise guest, Steve Duncombe, who somehow will be making it in here. He's trying to figure out how to log on. So my first question for all of you, because you all know how to use the chat now, is have you organized an event that like there was a weather thing or you couldn't get a permit, and what did you do? And just type that into the chat. What are things you've done to get around obstacles in the past? Because we've all had to do that. You know, a venue cancels or something and you have to figure something out quickly. So what do you have? And while you're putting in, we're going to talk about how you continue doing the important work that you're doing in the time of coronavirus. So what this means is a few things. One is we can't really, some of us can't leave the house. We have the people that we're trying to talk to are caring for other people. So there's like a time, some people have a lot of time, some people have less time than they've ever had. And then there's this restrictions on how we can gather, right? So all the sort of ordinary ways of protesting, you gather people in town square, you have a big march, you hold some sort of occupation in a building, we can't do. So what can we do? Now, nobody here has had a birthday canceled, come on, or a birthday party rained out. Let's hear from people. So I'm gonna get things going here. And one thing that I learned, I used to teach with Creative Capital, which is an arts funder, and they always talked about how every day the newspaper starts completely empty, right? All the pages of the newspaper are empty and they need to be filled with news. And the way that they talked about it was that when artists only try to get into the arts section, like you're really selling yourself short. There's a lot more that is possible than getting just into the art section. And artist projects often have aspects of them that could be included in, like I know artists that could be included in the sports section. I know artists that could be included in the business section, right? That there's aspects of the work that you're working on that can be in all different parts of the newspaper. So right now there's a lot of public health related news. There's a lot of news about the virus, but there's whole sections of the paper that are entirely empty. There's no sports events, really. There's no cultural events that are happening like they did at the pace and the quantity before. And there are few other gatherings that there are to report on. So one of the things that we can do, I'm going to share this screen with you now, is figure out ways of leveraging this moment in order to get press attention. And creating newsworthy events in this time enables us to have opportunities to get coverage. So here's an example. This is from our colleagues in North Macedonia, and they built this, I think about 2 weeks ago, which was really quickly. And so it's a public sculpture that reminds people to keep their physical distance, right? And not to shake hands. And at the time, this was a pretty timely message.
What I really like about this also is that when they put it out there, and they got a lot of press from it, they said, you know, when we were creating it, the artists who created it, and it was a bunch of people working together, they said, we didn't ever get near closer than 6 feet from each other. They worked in shifts. And so they created it with social distancing as well.
Yeah, and this is a great example of a press angle, right? Like, so not only do you have the sculpture that you can talk about, but there's this other aspect of, and we did it while maintaining social distance. So it gives the press more to write about. Let me show you this one. This is Vanya's piece, and Vanya had planned for weeks to make this mural that you're looking at on the bridge. We're looking at it overhead right now. And it's about saving the rivers, and she got all these people in the community to participate in this project too. And I'm going to show you this video quickly. Let me just turn down the sound. Because when she was ready to go, she was going to bring all the people that helped on the mural together to show it, like have a big press event, and she couldn't do that. So what she did instead was make this video. And for one, isn't it nice to see a beautiful river right now? So this is in Bosnian. Unfortunately, I'm not able to translate it. Maybe someone here can read this. She's working on a translation and is going to publish it tomorrow. But I believe this is the 300 panels, and she held parties and gatherings in bars where she had people paint the panel, and it was a way of building a whole community around this issue, and unable to do this big public event. So this is what she did, and she told press about it so that they could come, maintain the distance that they needed to make, and get this incredible documentation that she could share online. So I think this project is still very successful, and I really admire her ability to make such a quick change in a short time in order to make it work. There you go. So similarly, we made a very quick change at the Center for Artistic Activism. I realize I'm touching my face. Yeah. By the way,
careful.
Yeah. By the way, we're recording this on April 3rd. So the crazy thing that happened after that, we don't know about. I just want to make that clear. That's the context that we're recording this in. The things that happened after April 3rd, we don't know. So we very quickly made a change to our program and gathered people from around the world to create an advocacy innovation lab. So the idea is that we don't really know how things are going to change or how to achieve actions right now. That in order to find out, we need to do tests, and we need to do a lot of them and get a lot of different ideas. And that's the point of this project. And Rebecca, maybe you could throw a link in the chat to the information about it. But there's another reason that we think it works so well is that people want to do something in this moment, and there's so little we can do besides stay away from each other and connect online and stuff. So giving people that sense of agency, that there's a way that they contribute and it actually means something, I think is another inspiration point for us to think about how to make work right now. Okay, so next is our next little section is about making online content timely. And Rebecca, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so, you know, one benefit, of course, of online content is that you can make it so that it's really timely and also really responsive. And I think, Steve, you were going to talk about this site that you made when we were working with groups in Seattle that are working on the opioid crisis.
Right. So this site, it's delaysmeandeaths.org, and it's about overdose deaths that are happening in Seattle, in King County. And, you know, literally about every day somebody would die or is dying still of overdose deaths. And the city has this money that they could do something with, but they just haven't taken action. And so what we wanted to do was make this site that was like always talking about like, you have not been doing anything and this is the result. And to keep those stats. And programming wise, it was very simple, right? But when you go up to the site, the impact that it has of it, it counts up the days, it counts up the deaths, and it makes it current. And then in addition, we have this other part where if you click on that name, Robert, it takes you to information about that person that was submitted, where they can memorialize this person that they knew that died of overdose. So it's not just statistics, it's actual people. And there's a way as a visitor that you can contribute if you choose to talk about people that you've lost and give some life to these, what would be statistics to the city. So that's one example that might be a point of inspiration. The next one is Journal Rapé, which we talked about last week in our presentation, but Human and KT are trainers that we've worked with in Senegal, and they created a local in-depth news program, but it's the twist is that it's one 10-minute long hip hop mixtape. And so I'll play you just a little bit of the beginning of it, and you can watch the rest of them. They're amazing.
Bonjour. Ok. Bienvenue, installez-vous, on a des nouvelles pour vous. Il y a des bonnes, il y a des mauvaises, mais il y a des nouvelles pour vous. Bienvenue, installez-vous, on a des nouvelles pour vous. Il y a des bonnes, il y a des mauvaises, mais il y a des nouvelles pour vous. Dès que le ciel est gris.
This was incredibly popular in Senegal, and one of the things I like about it is that it quickly traveled the globe, so that there was a dance hall version in Jamaica, there was another version in Uganda that was in English. Everywhere it went, they used local language or local styles of language and did these timely news reports. So great project, and we're going to put links to all this stuff along with this, the documentation of this video, so you can check them out in detail. Okay, next is about mobilizing people's time. So like I said before, some people have a lot of time right now. Unfortunately, a lot of people have lost their work. And so that means that they have some time on their hands that we might be able to help them with and give them something that they can do that's meaningful. The youth activists have moved their climate strikes that they were doing on, I think it's on Fridays, they'd have regular climate strikes and not go to school, and they took it online. So they kind of refused to stop, even though school wasn't meeting in the same place. This next one is about how online meetings actually can work, and they can be used to great effect. So there are a lot of really great guides out there. We'll publish some links to them, but you can build community now too. There's a chance to connect with people that maybe you haven't been able to connect with before. So if you're doing online meetings, think about how you can let people connect socially at the beginning and at the end. You know, this is more of a presentation style, but when we do actual meetings, we spend a lot more time than we used to just connecting as people, because everyone needs that right now. And when we have a big meeting, we'll put people into smaller breakout rooms or smaller chats so that they can actually get a chance for some human connection that's often even unrelated to the content that we're dealing with. Steve, welcome.
I'm here.
Do you, just some time to talk about churches. You ready?
Oh, dang. Yes. Okay. So this is something, boy, this is really just thrown right into it.
Yep.
This is something which a lot of churches are doing right now. I know my church, Judson Church, is doing this, is they've within 2 weeks moved their entire worship sessions, their meditation sessions, everything online. And oddly enough, it actually works, and it can be moving in a way that sometimes the church services weren't so moving. So if the churches can do it, we can definitely do it.
Great. Rebecca.
Yeah, well, I have noticed that increasingly in meetings that are otherwise just normal business meetings, more people have had costumes or just like special little props maybe that they bring to a meeting, which I love. And I love the idea of just like that being a thing that we start doing together to bring in more weirdness and funniness and kind of community and connection. It's very simple.
The other thing is that these meetings don't have to be massive. We coincidentally, prior to this, we started offering online office hours, which was just like real low stakes, 15-minute meeting with us. And within minutes of posting it, all the slots were filled. Like I thought I had set up enough slots for us. They'd sit empty for like a month, but it turned out to be far more popular than we ever imagined. And somehow it not being like an official meeting, but just like a drop-in office hour thing, made it more special and more casual at the same time. So there's that. And Steve, you had this specific
Yeah.
suggestion here.
So this is a great resource for anybody, and it comes from the folks who put together the Sunrise Movement, which brought you the Green New Deal, and they turned around and within a couple of weeks put together this amazing pamphlet, actually it's like probably about 60-page long pamphlet of tips and tricks for doing online meetings. And I've done a lot of online meetings. We do a lot of online meetings here. I learned a lot from doing this, and it's free, so go check it out.
Cool.
Another thing is, not just online, but also using the phone. And we've been thinking a lot about, really old school ways of people having phone trees, to do activism or to do like community networking. We have some examples of this. I think, Steve, you had a good one.
Yeah, this is an old one where Greenpeace was trying to get Hewlett Packard to get a toxic chemical out of their printers, and what they did as Hewlett Packard got less and less cooperative with them, they robocalled all the mid-level managers, like this whole building of people that worked at Hewlett Packard. They just auto-dialed every single one of them. And the person that was calling was famous actor William Shatner. And he said, "Hey, this is William Shatner. I heard that you were going to build me this printer and this computer that would have less toxic chemicals in it, and then you stopped. What's the deal?" And that was it. Very like simple message, but because it was William Shatner and it was so weird that it stirred up a sort of conversation within the company itself, and then they pressured the upper level managers and asked them like, what's going on with this?
Yeah, and you can't always get William Shatner to do something like this, although he does seem to enjoy working with left organizations. But the idea is it's very low tech. It was just a robocall, but it was a robocall that had a creative twist insofar as people then would talk to their neighbors about, was that really Captain Kirk that called up? And so it's not just about using phones, but it's about using old technology in creative new ways.
And probably if you're in the US, you've heard about this. This is a very successful site, and it just simply connects people with issues that they care about and then connects them directly with their representatives in government to make a phone call. And I think, this is something in some other countries, there might be something like this, but I think there's just a lot of potential right now, especially for using voice and audio for this kind of activism.
Great. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so one of the key things about doing any sort of activist work is you want to lower barriers to participation. You want to figure out for people who are new to politics, how to give them a nice on-ramp into getting involved in your activism. But the same goes true when we think about online activism as well, is that often our activism entails having to physically show up at a demonstration or a picket line or something like that. Well, we can't do that right now. And so one of the things that we've been inspired by is activists who've actually lowered the physical barriers for participation by figuring out ways that people can actively be part of something, but do it in a virtual space. And so one of the first ones, Steve, you might want to introduce.
Yeah, so this is Partido de la Red, which was Argentina's internet party. And this is a pretty amazing in-person action that they did. So, you can tell they have a sense of spectacle and they know how to build a giant sculpture. But in order to bring people into the political conversation, what they did was they used a tool called Democracy OS. There's another one called Lumio that I've used, lumio.org. It actually has gotten me out of some committee meetings at my university. We just did it all in in Lumio, and we never had to meet, and everyone got along and it worked great. But basically, it's an open source online platform that allows people to discuss and debate policies and then vote on them. And the whole thing is like, it's built around agreement and helping people come to agreement. So the software is like taking that into account, whereas something like Facebook or a forum is not organized around getting people to agree. That's not how they succeed, right? So Lumio is run by an international nonprofit. Like I said, I believe it's lumio.org. And you can use their installation of it, or if you have a technically savvy person, they can set it up for you.
Yeah. And the key here, just to go back and reinforce something, is
Oh yeah,
to really to figure out how to lower barriers and make participation easy in this moment when people are on lockdown, they're sick in bed, or their schedule's impacted caring for friends, neighbors, and loved ones. And just understanding that that's our new reality. And so what are the barriers that people have to overcome, and what sort of tools can we use to make it easier for people to participate in our actions?
great.
One thing that we've talked about is just how people are stuck at home and they're desperate to hear good news and positive things. And, you know, to give people a sense of agency when the world feels so out of control, and when to give people an opportunity to contribute something, and then of course see the effect of that contribution is so great. One example that I really love actually has historically been done a lot in person. This is the Art and Feminism Wikipedia Edit-a-thon, which you might have heard of. It's happened all over the world. And the goal of this project is to increase the presence on Wikipedia of cis and trans women, non-binary people, people of color, and indigenous communities. And, you know, Wikipedia is the 10th most visited site in the world. I'm going to put a link in the chat, or maybe somebody already did.
Of where
Yeah, thank you,
Wikipedia
Joe.
is?
No, of the Art and Feminism project. But since 2014, over 14,000 people at more than 1,000 events around the world have participated, and they have improved more than 58,000 articles on Wikipedia, including the stories and voices of people who historically really have been so incredibly underrepresented. Just like a great example of just these prompts that really invite people in to edit stories about anything that they care about in their world, but to do it together. And in these get-togethers, they train people how to do it and also make it really a community event. And that's something that can happen online really very easily.
Cool.
No, you can't do this. You can't meet people outside. What's this doing here, Steve?
When we were talking about this before, Steve was like, I don't get this one. They're standing next to each other.
There's no physical distance there.
Yeah, and I was like, but they are wearing gloves. So this is clearly from the before times, but this is a US public television show, and I actually think they've done some of it internationally, but it's called Family Pictures. And on the show, it was started by an artist who, you know, through his own research, started talking to people about their family photos, and found that some people didn't know what to do with them, or like they kept them in a box. But the conversations that came out of like, well, let's look at your family photos and what's there and what stories do you know about these people, were actually really fascinating. And I even was skeptical, but we had the chance to meet him and see him present this with like a live audience, and it was so fascinating. And the photos themselves really kind of become a very simple way to get people to talk about their lives and connect with each other. And I know just even on my block, like there's a new desire for people to connect with each other and get to know their neighbors. I think, and as the weeks and months come, you know, this kind of thing is going to be even more important. And that this little technique really enabled a really open conversation in a way that I was kind of stunned by. So I'm not saying that you should meet people in person, but very easily we can figure out ways of, you know, re-photographing some family photos as a picture on your phone and share it with some people, and even make that part of the organizing you do, you know, like a fun activity, but there's this other aspect that brings the group together. So let's talk about games. Rebecca, you're muted.
But you're a gamer. We know you're a gamer.
I keep on getting forwarded this New York Times article from, I think it's like last week, it's a perfect time to play video games and don't feel bad about it. And it's a great time to approach people in that way, right? And it's not that it's easy to just whip up a good video game, but there actually are some good tools out there to make it easier. One thing that we've worked with is Twine to make an interactive game quite easily. One that we wanted to show you, which we think is great as a kind of creative activism project, is next slide.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was
That's
writing in
okay.
the chat.
Oh, great. Yeah. Any favorite games out there that people are playing? Good question.
Yeah.
This is Get Bad News. It's a game where you are a troll creating fake news. And we heard about this because we heard these social science researchers talking about it. They developed it because they wanted to help people understand when they are encountering fake news. And it teaches you how to make the high quality fake stuff, because the research shows that well, when people play this game, they're many more times likely to know what is fake news after they do this, because they actually have the skills to do it.
So the next one,
oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
is it's the burger.
It's a classic.
It's a classic. It's the McDonald's game, and it's by our friend Paolo Pedericini. And Paolo was a young communist, and he was a member of the Communist Party. I don't think he minds telling
In Italy.
In Italy. And he would go to these communist meetings, and they were incredibly boring. And all his friends just wanted to do was play video games. And so he learned the skills, and he's an artist now, and teaching at Carnegie Mellon. And he started to design communist video games. What they do is fascinating. Is it puts you in the position not of the communist but of the capitalist who has to make money. And so the McDonald's game, for example, teaches you that in order to make a profit at McDonald's, you have to exploit your workers, you have to lie through public relations, and you have to cut down large swaths of the rainforest. But there's actually really kind of fun to play. He's also done one around mobile phones and the conditions necessary to create mobile phones. But the idea is, what video games do and why people love them is they're immersive. You lose yourself in them. You become someone else. And so it's also a great platform in these times when we can't talk to anybody face to face, of experiencing others' positions, whether they're capitalists or perhaps environmentalists fighting the capitalists.
Or a factory worker working on a phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So this leads into your next one.
Yeah, which is about thinking creatively about the tactics we use in real life, and now given the conditions, how do we move them to this new world that we live in? One of the great things about creative activism is it's not just coming up with creative new tactics, it's trying to figure out how to creatively adapt old tactics to new conditions. And one of our favorites actually is about 30 years old now.
Yeah, this is another classic.
Yeah, this was FloodNet. Steve, you want to talk about FloodNet?
I don't know a whole lot about it. I know about DDoS attacks, which is
that's way too wonky for me to even understand.
Yeah.
So I'll just go in and give you the simple version. It's a virtual sit-in. And it was created in solidarity with the Zapatistas as a way for the Zapatista supporters around the world to literally sit in at the Mexican government's offices. But since they were scattered all around the world, they couldn't do that. So what they did was they sat in on their websites, and through the DDoS, the denial of service attacks, they were able to crash the websites of the Mexican embassy and the Mexican government. Now, who knew about that? Nobody except the person working on the website in the Mexican government, and a couple hundred people inconvenienced. But then they told newspapers about it. And in telling newspapers about it, newspapers covered the story, which then allowed them to slip the story of the Zapatista uprising, the Mexican government repression into that story. But again, they just thought about, how do you create a sit-in around the world? And they figured it out. They
also did it in a very clever way, if I remember right. Like, they would overwhelm the server with requests for searching for human rights.
Yes, and for peace and for justice. And then, of course, what you get as a response is not found. And so it would say human justice not found on this website.
Yeah.
You know, human dignity not found on this website. That was Ricardo Dominguez, was one of the people that worked on that, who's both a poet and an artist. This next
Poet and activist.
Poet and activist. And this next tactic is one of the tactics that all activists use, which is the protest and the demonstration. But what happened in Spain during this moment was that the Spanish government, and this is about 2 or 3 years ago, outlawed any groupings of more than 20 or 25 people. And so basically outlawed protests. And so a group of artists and activists got together and they created the first ever hologram protest, where they filmed themselves having a protest, and then they set up a projector and projected it onto, I think, a clear Mylar screen. And then it essentially created this ghostly apparition of a protest that could be seen in public, yet it wasn't really more than 25 bodies. It was just one person with a projector. And in this day and age, when we can't come together, either using this technique directly or thinking about how can you move bodies into the street while still having physical distance. Could you have a protest, for example, where everybody stands 6 feet apart? Could you have a protest, where everybody has to wear masks? I mean, there's all sorts of ways we can think about doing the work that we used to do, doing it creatively in these new spaces and given these new conditions, which leads us to the next.
Before we go into that one, another sort of classic technique is the shoes, right? Like everyone takes a pair of shoes and puts them in the place where they would be, and so you see this collection of shoes that represents all the people. Another thing I love about this Spanish hologram protest, they like promoted it as the first ever protest by hologram, and it's like it's not actually a hologram. They figured out a way to sell it, so as we go into, go ahead.
I was just going to staying with the shoes, Steve, is our friends in the Balkans even took that tactic.
Who are here.
Oh yes, excellent.
On the webinar.
Took this tactic even one step further. And one of the problems in the Balkans is the brain drain, or the young people leaving the country. And so not only did they shoes, they brought people's like suitcases and clothes as these protests. And it really got this sense of bodies not being there. A beautiful, beautiful idea. But being creative about a creative protest to begin with.
So before we're going to sort of wrap up here, and we have a few more examples, but we're wondering what things you've seen or what you've heard. We get sent links and such all the time about the stuff. We obviously aren't getting everything. So if you could write that into the chat. There's also a Q&A area. If you want to ask a question, we can
or just put it in the chat
questions.
so it's all in one place.
Sure, yeah.
Too. And I do want to note one of the ways that we've had some of these great ideas is from Goran, who is here in the webinar.
Oh, great.
So thank you.
Shout out to Goran.
Oh, look, he just, so Goran, Joe is asking if you have a link from the action with all of the shoes.
Yeah, we'll include it.
And yeah, to that point of like just some other ones that we've heard about, we've been thinking about how street actions really are still viable. We saw the ones from the Balkans with the hand sculptures. We've also thought about, appointment only kind of experiences. So making some sort of experience in the middle of the city, but then making an appointment list and call it VIP. So people can only come 1 or 2 at a time to have a special experience that's only for them. We've also, there's also wonderful things that people have done with audio. Just that, that you have some sort of timed thing, you go to a place and put your headphones on and then get an audio tour of a place that can be activist related.
Mm-hmm. And what's wonderful is some of these things have just come up almost spontaneously by people who wouldn't think of themselves as activists. And by now we all know about, for example, in Italy during the lockdown, how people would sing to one another through open windows and serenade one another open windows. There's a band in Barcelona that gigs outside on a fire escape every night and composes songs about the coronavirus. And here in New York City, if any of you are out there from New York City, you've probably heard at 7 o'clock, what ends up happening is the entire city erupts and yelling out the windows and banging pots. And it's, being here in New York City, the rest of the day is pretty grim. It's a grim time in New York City. nobody's on the street, and there's mobile hospitals being set up and mobile morgues. But then at 7 o'clock, the city erupts in joy. And it's just like this public call to say, we're alive. We're alive, and we're still here, and we're going to be here tomorrow. And again, these aren't activists that are doing it, but it's this idea of how do you connect when you can't connect physically. And these are some of the ways. So if you do live in New York City, open your window at 7 o'clock.
And I think that started in Italy, right? Like
I
it started
believe
in
so.
some other countries.
In Italy, yeah.
So maybe in your country this is happening too.
Yeah, or maybe you can start it.
Exactly, even
Right.
better.
Yeah,
Right,
Jolie and Goran, thank you for sharing the links to the shoes in the chat.
Yeah. So Rebecca, tell us about
Yeah.
this.
Oh yeah, this was, we're doing this action, this campaign around coronavirus vaccine. And these are some colleagues in Europe who are doing a protest. And the way that they're calling for an action on April 7th to take out a big white sheet and to write on it to say what you're demanding from the government, or to make sure that the vaccine and treatment are affordable for everyone. And they're just saying, wherever you are, write something on white paper or white sheet, put it somewhere public if you can, hang it out your balcony and take a picture and share it on social media. They also have a global map so that you can map where you've done it and put a picture so that you get a sense for all the other places in the world where this is happening. I can put a link to that. Oh, did you already, Joe, did you already put a link to that?
I think I did.
can. Yeah, I think
And,
it's already there. Thank you.
Carrie, you're going to like this one. So this was in Mexico City, and cab drivers that were protesting Uber. And this was like a week or maybe 10 days ago, I'm not sure. But they figured out how to block the streets without having a big gathering, and they just drove their cabs in and parked it. And Carrie, you said there was a honkathon to protest ICE in Hartford, where you are. Demanding the release of people that were detained during COVID, and people just showed up in their cars and laid on their horns and maintained their physical distance, which I like that one. This is another Center for Artistic Activism project that we did last year in Seattle, and related to the overdose deaths. And these numbers represent the number of overdose deaths. We actually, unfortunately, we were able to time it so that when we released or installed the sculpture, it was the number of deaths that was around that date. Actually, I had exceeded it by the time we installed it, but we got close. But in some ways, it's a monument, right? But it had this interactive element, which was that people could come by and put flowers for loved ones. They could write notes, and they could put photos in the little tubes. And it became a way for them to mark their presence, that they had been there, that these people were remembered without a big crowd, right? And that and this was put up in front of City Hall. So when the City Hall workers came in, they had to walk by it. Now, I don't know that we could pull this off right now, but that idea of leaving a mark as people go by, could work. People, at least here, are still going out for walks, for exercise. And is there a way that they can mark their presence so that not everyone has to be there at the same time?
Yeah, and that really goes to this next thing, which I believe Goran sent to us.
He did, yeah.
And it's a really funny sign. It's a very pointed sign about who gets to have tests and who doesn't get to have tests, and the inequalities in healthcare. And it isn't going to get as much traffic as it normally would. But I was walking down the street and someone just put up a simple sign about this is a time to care for one another. And because it's such a heightened emotional time, to find a sign like this, even by yourself, actually has sometimes even a more profound effect. And then, of course, what did I do? I shot a picture of it and I put it up on Instagram, and other people commented on it, and so on and so forth, because it captured a moment and it captured a time. And so, yes, we're not outside as much as we used to, but these signs can have real impact, both on a personal level, but also through social media.
Rebecca and I were talking about what you could do with flyers, and an old friend of mine, Todd Brilliant, brought up that more people are out taking walks, and so like the old-fashioned telephone pole flyer might actually have a renaissance. But these ones where you tear away something like also show that there's been a presence of people and that you're not alone. And these were just some fun ones that might inspire you to, with a few ideas. This one is more timely.
Just be sure to wash your hands.
Yeah,
After you
yeah.
pull that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is by the Good Liars Club. They're active in New York and maybe elsewhere too. The next one I think is from last week, or actually it maybe is a little dated at this point. This is in New York, I
March
think.
26th, it says.
Yeah, yeah.
This last one, I was like, we should put this in there. And Goran posted it. And we had a 5 or 10 minute discussion about whether or not it actually was meaningful and what it meant and how it was related. So from what I understand, this is in Italy, and Goran, maybe you can, if we miss something big, just like type it into the chat so we know, because Goran was the one who passed this along. But I think this was supposed to be a giant meditating person that was going to be installed in a town square. And the mask was added in order to make it a little bit more relevant, because that was, you couldn't plan around this. And they decided to burn the one part of it and leave the torso part with the mask. I don't know if the plan was to burn the whole thing the whole time. The reason, Valencia, thank you. The reason I brought it up is because it's just so striking, and I kind of wondered what it would be like to be in one of the nearby buildings and see this. The problem was we weren't really sure how it connected to the COVID-19 crisis. But there's something like spooky about it that I think really works. And so we thought we'd show it to you, and Goran, Jolie, if you guys have insights, please pass them along. But you know, is there a place for this more sort of symbolic, or Rebecca, you actually had a good sort of interpretation of it. I don't want to butcher it. Can you?
Gosh,
It was
what did
about,
I
it was
say?
called, they started to call it "This Too Will Pass," right? And that the
Oh, right.
framing.
Yeah, I thought that there was a message about how this, this time is really difficult, but also it's not going to last forever. And to remember that if you can, to have peace internally and to not be anxious about it is the best thing that you can do to help everyone around you too. I don't know, that's like a pretty broad interpretation, but that's what I got from it.
And I like the fact that we had all different interpretations, because we have to remember that one of the things about doing artistic activism is that it has these different meanings, and it has these different different meanings that you can debate about. That a lot of the things we did show you were rather didactic insofar as here's what it means, it's supposed to do this. But we always have to remember that the real power of this artistic activism is often that you're like, what the hell is that about? And then you think about what it's about, and you talk to a friend about what it's about. And that the part of the power of what we do is to create these situations which really affect people as well as effect people.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as we move from the real world into the virtual life, we have to keep some of that creativity with us. We have to keep some of that magic of artistic activism, the thing which makes it different.
Right. Exactly. And I think to that point, it's like, in the end, it all comes back to some principles that are true no matter what the format, right? Like in terms of what makes for great and moving things that really change people and affect change in general. So some of our favorite things that just keep on coming up for us over the years that we've been working on this is to have things that allow for participation and really invite people in. They're welcoming. Of course, surprising and weird and funny are always good, aesthetically pleasing, and
On
really
fire.
On fire is always a good touch. Sometimes a good touch, I should say.
Sometimes good.
And to be relatable and emotional is always key. And so, I think there are ways to do that no matter how much physical distancing we have to do.
Yeah, one time I got to interview a comedian named, wait, was it him who said that? I think it was W. Kamau Bell, who's like a comedian here in the US, who does a lot of like political content, very smart guy. And the question was like, you know, is there ever a time when you can't make a joke, or it's like not funny? And he was like, no, it's just, you have to be a better joke writer, you know? And in our experience, that's always been true. You know, we talked to this woman that was working on torture in Russia, and she's like, can we even be funny about this issue? And we're like, yeah, it's just harder, you know, like, let's take a minute and think about it. And within about 15 minutes, we could. So again, I just want to say, this is April 3rd. So the thing that happened after this, where you're like, wow, that was wrong. We didn't know about that when I'm saying this now, but from where we are now, I think there still can be a place for, like, people still need joy. They still need a sense of humor. It just has to be done even better than it was before. And there's still a real place for this work. And the main reason that we put this together is we don't want you to feel like the really important things that you were working on before are no longer important. They're still important, and that you can't do them. You still can, it's just harder. You just have to spend a little bit more time thinking about it. Anything else?
No.
No.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thanks. And
Super fun to see all of you.
And be
Yeah.
well. Be well, be
Yes,
creative,
everybody be
be
safe.
active. Take care of each other.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. See you soon, hopefully.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
And
Bye.
yell at 7 o'clock, wherever you are.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Goran. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah.
Kathy. All right, here we go.